Make no mistake about it, both times Donald Trump has been in office, his Department of Justice and the FBI have been accused of turning a blind eye to investigations connected to Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch. Located about 30 miles outside Santa Fe, New Mexico, Zorro Ranch has long been the subject of disturbing allegations. Some witnesses and tipsters have claimed that bodies may be buried on the property. Victims, they allege, of fetishized sexual abuse and exploitation involving women. According to those allegations, beginning in 2019, the Trump administration's Department of Justice and the FBI not only ended active investigations related to the ranch, but also pressured New Mexico authorities to halt their own inquiries. Zorro Ranch. Have you ever heard of anything like it? Unless, of course, you happen to be a close friend of a convicted child sex trafficker. As critics argue Donald Trump was with Jeffrey Epstein, they claim that Trump's Justice Department, then led by Bill Barr, ordered investigators to stand down and pulled critical manpower away from efforts to examine what may have happened at Zorro Ranch. But now, major developments are unfolding. A bipartisan special committee of the New Mexico legislature, working alongside Attorney General Raul Torres, is issuing subpoenas in an effort to create a complete and documented record of the alleged child sex trafficking network and its connections to Zorro Ranch. The commission says it intends to uncover facts that, in its view, the federal government has been unwilling to fully pursue. Recent reports confirm that New Mexico's Bipartisan Truth Commission has begun issuing subpoenas to federal agencies, law enforcement entities, and other organizations as part of its investigation. Addressing survivors, Attorney General Torres delivered a direct message. Your voices and your stories matter. What you choose to share and entrust with law enforcement in New Mexico will directly aid in this investigation. We want to hear directly from you in the weeks and months ahead. The commission is expected to focus heavily on subpoenaing records from federal agencies, including the Department of Justice, the FBI, and offices connected to prior investigations. Reports indicate that subpoenas have already been directed toward multiple federal and state agencies. I'm glad you're here on Legal AF as we kick off another round of fresh reporting. Let's dive into what is happening at Zorro Ranch. There has been extensive reporting on the ranch over the years, including work by reporter Alyssa Valdez Rodriguez. In recent days, Rodriguez claimed on her Substack that she was targeted by a sonic weapon, either from an aircraft or a backpack-sized device, and that she has suffered serious health effects ever since. She has not directly identified who she believes was responsible. However, her statements appear to suggest suspicion toward the federal government. Supporters of her work point to past comments from Donald Trump regarding the use of sonic-type weapons in Venezuela, where reports alleged security personnel around Nicolas Maduro suffered severe physical effects, including bleeding and disorientation. Out of all the journalists covering the Epstein story, Rodriguez believes she was specifically targeted while attempting to uncover new information about Zorro Ranch. Whether those claims can be substantiated remains an open question. What is clear is that New Mexico's Special Commission is now moving forward aggressively in pursuit of answers. And ultimately, that's what many people say they want: the truth. Speaking about the investigation, one lawmaker involved in the effort declared, "We will name what happened. We will name who is responsible. And we will do so with the evidentiary regard that survivors deserve and that the law requires." That statement came from Representative Andrea Reeb, a Republican member of the commission. Reeb is one of 4 lawmakers serving on the bipartisan panel, which was specifically created to investigate allegations surrounding Epstein's activities at Zorro Ranch. Public records confirm that the commission was established with subpoena authority and bipartisan membership to examine alleged criminal activity connected to the property. In fact, we have a clip about it right now.
Virginia was
Let's
not
play the
only
clip.
abused by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. She was trafficked to extremely wealthy, powerful, and dangerous individuals. Some of that trafficking happened right here in New Mexico at Zorro Ranch. That is not speculation. That is not rumor. That is testimony. And New Mexico now stands at crossroads. This state can either repeat the failures we have already witnessed across institutions and protected power over people, or New Mexico can lead. Lead with courage.
Also decided to issue these 14 subpoenas. Now, they're not to a specific person, but they are to entities like the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice's office is in New Mexico, the Attorney General's office, multiple entities that they say could have played a role in this or did not do enough investigating. I can't remember if it was Sky or Amanda, but one of them talked about this meaningful separation between the state and the federal government, meaning that the state can get justice for survivors if the federal government is not going to. And we know these survivors have been let down time and time again by the federal government. And even if you just look at the way that the committee in D.C. is handling this, we heard an interview from Pam Bondi, or there was an interview with Pam Bondi last week. And yet, only one Republican showed up, and that was the chairman of the committee.
And yet, somehow, the Department of Justice and the FBI under Donald Trump seem convinced that there is no story at Zorro Ranch. But how do they know? References to Zorro Ranch reportedly appear throughout the more than 3 million pages of Epstein-related documents released under Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi. There have also been persistent reports and allegations suggesting that bodies may be buried on the property. If those claims exist, why wasn't the matter pursued further? Instead, critics argue, the Department of Justice chose to look the other way. What's even more striking is that the decision puzzled not only Trump's critics. Even James Comer, a leading MAGA Republican who chairs an oversight committee, reportedly questioned why the investigation into Zorro Ranch had been brought to an abrupt end. For many observers, that raises an obvious question. If there was nothing there, why shut down the investigation? And if serious allegations remained unresolved, why was there so little appetite to continue digging for answers? Those are precisely the questions that continue to fuel scrutiny surrounding Zorro Ranch today. Here's a clip.
Sounds pretty sick if what's been said about it's true. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm glad that the New Mexico authorities are going there and searching that property. I know that if no one searches the property, whenever this investigation is finally concluded, people are always going to have questions about whether or not there were deaths there, whether or not there were mysterious surgeries and things like that happening on the ranch. I don't know, but I do know this. The federal government asked New Mexico to stop their investigation, I believe back in 2019 of that ranch. So there's just so many questions about how the government failed the victims and how government failed in trying to prosecute Epstein sooner. I mean, this whole thing doesn't make sense. Everyone has conspiracy theories on, how Epstein was able to get away with it. Was it because he had, powerful friends?
Yeah.
Was it because he was an agent? No, we don't know, but we're going to find out. And I'm glad that they're on the ground now in New Mexico searching that property.
Congressman, you said in 2019 the government told New Mexico authorities to stand down investigating the ranch. Do you know what branch of the government?
It was the Department of Justice, I believe, and I believe it was because they I believe it perhaps was the Southern District of New York, because they had taken over the investigation at that point. So again, these are questions that we have. We want to get the answers, but I will say publicly, I'm glad that the New Mexico authorities are on the ground searching that property. I don't know if there's anything there. I don't think anybody knows, but I do know this, Jesse. It's probably never been searched before very thoroughly.
That's crazy.
The house probably has, but the property hasn't.
This story needs to be pursued. And we've talked often about the critical role that states and state attorneys general can play when they step in and do the hard work of restoring dignity to survivors and delivering justice. Why does that matter? Because our Department of Justice has become so deeply compromised that many Americans no longer trust it to protect victims. Instead, it appears more focused on pursuing Donald Trump's perceived political enemies. That seems to be where its energy and enthusiasm lie. But who is standing up for the survivors? We constantly hear discussions about creating funds to compensate January 6 defendants and others who claim they were targeted by the Biden administration. But where is the fund for the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein? Where is the support for the more than 14 survivors who were failed by the very institutions that were supposed to protect them? The Department of Justice and the FBI let these victims down. Whether it was the decision in 2019 to halt the search at Zorro Ranch, or the shocking dismissal of Annie Farmer's report, a teenager who came forward after being solicited for sex by a man named Jeffrey Epstein. Her complaint was effectively ignored by the FBI's Miami field office. Why aren't we talking about compensation for those victims? Why aren't we talking about accountability? That's why. when I hear that New Mexico has found a way to put partisan divisions aside, come together, and under the leadership of its Attorney General begin documenting and chronicling the child sex trafficking network connected to Epstein, I believe that's something worth celebrating. Because if there is one issue that should transcend politics, it is this: America does not support child sex traffickers. America does not support people who cover for child sex traffickers. And America does not support people who cannot explain why they are protecting or covering for child sex traffickers. Donald Trump has access to every tool necessary to help uncover the truth and move this case forward. Yet he has repeatedly chosen not to do so. He insists there is no story here. He directs the FBI and the Department of Justice not to release files unless they are ultimately forced to do so by overwhelming public pressure and the demands of survivors seeking justice. That is why we will continue following the Epstein story the same way we always have. We've heard directly from Epstein survivors. We've listened to their experiences, their pain, and their search for dignity and justice. Their stories deserve to be told, and their voices deserve to be heard. And they are not going to stop fighting until they obtain the justice and dignity they deserve. Neither are we. We will continue standing with survivors, continue demanding answers, and continue asking the questions that powerful people would rather avoid. Thank you for being here. If you value independent reporting and accountability, be sure to subscribe and help this community continue to grow.